Hello everybody, welcome to this Statistical Society of Australia mentoring webinar. We're so glad you could join us. I'm Susanna Cray, I'm the Vice President of Memberships at SSA, and I'm very honoured to be doing the introductions today. Firstly, I do want to acknowledge that most of us are on First Nations land, so in the spirit of reconciliation, the Statistical Society of Australia acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Mentoring is something our members have often asked for, so it is such a pleasure to welcome Dr. Karen Lam today, a Senior Consultant Biostatistician based at the University of Melbourne. She's worked so hard to get this scheme up and running, creating and launching a pilot program, mentoring program last year in the Biostatistics and Bioinformatics Section. She's now launching an SSA-wide program through the Continuous Professional Development Committee. So Karen will share why she created a mentoring program, what was found out from the mentoring pilot, and what's going to happen moving forward with the whole society initiative. There will be plenty of time for questions afterwards also. I'm also really delighted to welcome Raj Biswas and Chris Rogers, who will be speaking about their experiences as a mentee and mentor in the program respectively. So over to you, Karen.
Thanks very much, Susanna, and thanks everyone for coming along today. I'm really excited to share what we've been getting up to with these mentoring programs, what we did in the pilot and what we're trying to do now. And I really hope that some of you will be interested in participating and joining us in building greater community through mentoring. So why did I think that the Society needed a mentoring program? Well, this came from a very personal place for me. I felt that I have benefited an awful lot from mentoring myself. I relocated to Australia almost 9 years ago now and just didn't have the connections myself in Australia. I had a good network of people in Scotland and in England, but coming over here, I felt very isolated. But I was very fortunate when I relocated that I joined the Victorian Centre for Biostatistics. And so through that, I was able to connect with not only other postgraduates, postdoctorates that I could chat to and really have a peer network, but I also was able to be mentored by other statisticians and other institutes. And that was really invaluable for me in trying to build connections when I just embarked on a new adventure in a new country. So in particular, one of the reasons that I feel it's so important for statisticians to have a mentoring program is that our jobs are a little bit unusual. You know, we often find ourselves being the only statistician in a research group. And certainly as a biostatistician, that's something I found a lot. Sometimes I was being managed by people that weren't statisticians, that didn't really know how my career would progress, couldn't really help me with that. And also a lot of the time I was working in teams without other statisticians. So there was no one really for me to talk to. And that was in Scotland before coming over here. So I really benefited from mentoring programs in Scotland too, through the Royal Statistical Society, so that I could build these connections. Another reason, as I say, came from a personal space for me because I relocated to Australia and I wanted to build connections. But I have recognised over the years being here that many statisticians in Australia are from all over the place. Many people like me haven't got these connections. And even those of us that are from Australia born, you know, we often move a lot and Australia is massive. So it's really important that we help to build community and connections. And as I say, thinking about Australia in particular, when I was based in the UK, I was very actively involved in the Royal Statistical Society. And even though I was in Scotland and not near London, it's much easier to get from Glasgow down to London for RSS meetings and have face-to-face interaction. But when you think about the fact here, although we have local branch events, still for people that are working as statisticians outside of the cities, it can be very difficult to go and meet up with other statisticians and build that interaction. So we need to do something a bit more creative in Australia to try and actually help support our community. So one of the reasons mentoring is so critical to the professional development of early career statisticians is that it helps us to build these personal and professional skills to help move up in the workplace. You know, things that are very particular to statisticians that maybe our employers might not be so familiar with. Mentoring is really important, as I say, for building connections outside of our immediate workplace. And that counts for people that actually are working with other statisticians. It's still really important that you connect with others around the country. And one of the things I want to stress here, it's often perceived that only mentees really benefit from a mentoring program, because they're getting all of this learning and all of this valuable experience from a more experienced statistician. But of course, one thing I want to stress is that mentors also benefit. It's such a valuable experience for both parties. Mentors can develop leadership skills, good communication skills, listening skills, and a lot of other things through working with their mentees, as well as, again, themselves building greater connections. So it's really important that mentors appreciate that while there's a time commitment there, that they're actually getting something out of this too. So one of the reasons we decided to embark on a pilot in the Biostatistics and Bioinformatics section was because we recognised attending the ISCB ASC conference during the SSA executive meeting, there was some discussions about the fact that it was so exciting to have events like this going on, the fact that particularly among the biostatistics group, having the ISCB being in Australia for the first time was just amazing for connecting statisticians that don't usually talk to one another. And as I say, Louise Ryan in particular really appreciated the fact that we were all there chatting together, sharing our knowledge and experience. So that was one reason that me at the time, I was co-chair of the Biostatistics and Bioinformatics section. And so we thought we'd start there. Another reason I thought the Statistical Society could have its own program is because these kind of things exist in other statistical organisations. When I was in the Royal Statistical Society in the UK, I benefited from a mentor myself and have also mentored people to get chartered statistician status, for example. So that seemed like there was a gap for us to fill in the SSA. And similarly, the American Statistical Association has their own mentoring schemes. Now, I am aware of mentoring initiatives within Australia. As I mentioned, as part of the Victorian Centre for Biostatistics, I did have a mentor, which was fantastic. I have been speaking to people in South Australia and in Queensland in the different branches of the SSA who've been thinking about their own mentoring programmes. And also the Victorian branch has run at least 2 now mentoring, sort of speed networking mentoring events where we're pairing more experienced statisticians with early career statisticians. But I thought it'd be great to have something that was really formal within the society, a SSA-wide initiative, so that we're not stuck within our silos. I say initially, it was going to be within our section, the Biostat section, but the idea was if this pilot was successful, I wanted it to be something that had greater reach across the whole of the country. So we decided, following all of many discussions I had, particularly with Mary-Louise, she and I chatted a lot about the need for a mentoring program and what we could try and do within the society. And we decided to launch a pilot mentoring program last year. So around the end of 2019, there were a lot of discussions between our section and the executive, trying to work out exactly how we should approach this and how we could do this in a careful, respectful manner as well, because we were aware that having to support mentees and mentors meant that, it's building a relationship of trust, and people might have not had experience in these kind of relationships in the past. And we knew that we had to offer the support as well as an organisation, which is why we wanted it to be a formal mentoring process. So with our pilot programme, biostatisticians and bioinformaticians that were members of the SSA could apply to take part. Now, we were very keen that it was a members only initiative, because this really is something that we want to be a benefit of being part of the society. Join the society, become part of the community, and we can offer some of these benefits back to you all. So in the pilot, we had a bit of back and forth about who should be eligible to be mentees, who should be eligible to be mentors. In the end, we decided that mentees could be anyone within the first 10 years of a career in statistics. So that could include biostatisticians, bioinformaticians who were students, but those that are also early career biostatisticians. Now, the one thing that we weren't so sure about was what was the criteria that we wanted to have for the mentors. Now, initially, there was some discussion that we should make sure that the mentors had ASTAT certification. Now, while that would ensure that we were aware of, I guess, some of their experience and professional qualifications, I was mindful that this would perhaps limit the mentors that we could recruit into the program, and I didn't really want to do that. And I'm going to talk a bit more in a second about the challenge of getting mentors into the program. So instead of ensuring ASTAT accreditation, we just wanted to ensure that they had a minimum of 10 years employment experience. And that was just to ensure that the mentors had more experience than the mentees. Now, another thing that I think was great in retrospect, given COVID last year, we didn't want to have the meetings in person. And we didn't want it to be only people within Melbourne, for example, could be paired with a mentor in Melbourne. So you didn't have to be located within the same city or state to be in a pair. And our aim for this pilot that was taking place over the whole year was for mentors ideally to meet once every 4 to 6 weeks during the pilot. Okay, so I mentioned briefly that finding mentors was a challenge. Finding mentors was actually an enormous challenge, and is something that I'm very mindful of moving forward into rolling out the initiative more broadly. So we advertised the program September 2019 to begin in 2020. And all of our mentees and mentors had to apply to participate by the end of October. And that was going to give us a couple of months of matching so that in the early 2020, we could start introducing everyone. Now, the problem was, as I say, we were looking for 10 mentor-mentee pairs for this pilot. And while we had a sufficient number of mentees, by my deadline, I only had 3 potential mentors, which was quite concerning. So of course, as a committee, our section decided that we should extend the application deadline. And look, I really did have to reach out to my own network. And as I say, it was fortunate that we were launching this pilot within the biostatistics group, because being a biostatistician myself, I was able to actually approach some people and say, look, you're a fantastic mentor. Would you consider this? Now, one thing that I was mindful of was that mentors may feel that it was going to be such a big time pressure for them, and that might be what's putting them off engaging. But actually, more often than not, the feedback I was getting from the mentors was that rather than being worried that they were going to spend a lot of time on it, it was that they weren't sure what they were going to offer to the mentee. So it was more about the mentor's confidence than anything else. And that was where all the reservations came from. So I had to spend quite a bit of time reassuring people that mentoring is not about teaching technical skills or trying to help people that haven't done spatiotemporal epidemiology, that this is what they're going to do now. It's more about sharing your experiences and the things that you've learned over the years working as a statistician and providing that support and that connection. So in providing that support from the SSA perspective, that meant that I was able, thankfully, to recruit the mentors that I wanted. So at the end of November, we ended up with 37 applicants. So we had 26 mentees. So that was a problem. In extending the deadline, we actually ended up with yet more mentees, of course, being interested. And we just had over the number of mentors that we required for this pilot. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of information about who participated and who applied to take part. So we recently, I think it was towards the end of 2019, had rebranded as the Biostatistics and Bioinformatics Section. And so we are trying to encourage a lot more initiatives with bioinformaticians, but still, I think the fact that most of our mentees were biostatisticians rather than bioinformaticians still really reflects who is in the membership of the SSA. We still don't have quite so many people that would identify exclusively as a bioinformatician in the organization. So I knew that it was going to be challenging for me if I wanted to pair bioinformaticians. And the other thing that I was very conscious of was that most of the mentees were from academia. And maybe again, that's something specific to being a biostatistician or bioinformatician. But expanding the program, I have to be mindful that we are looking to recruit people in industry and government as well. And so that might make it a bit harder to reach out to mentors too and support them. Because as you can see, the bottom point here, all mentors were biostatisticians and were employed in academia. So we didn't really have anyone that could support those that weren't in academia. We did have one applicant that was from government. Thankfully, one of our mentors had prior experience in government, so they seemed like a suitable match. But still, it was really tricky to think of this program as something outside of academia, at least for this pilot. What was also really nice to see was that we had applicants from across Australia. We actually had applicants from all the Australian states and territories apart from Tasmania. And so we were really keen, as much as possible, to have representation across all of these states and territories. So I just wanted to give you a bit of a snapshot of some of the reasons people applied to take part. So in the initial survey that we asked people to do expressions of interest, we asked both mentees and mentors to indicate why they want to take part, because that could help us pair them. So one of the mentees said, the mentoring program sounds like a great opportunity for me to learn more about career progression as a biostatistician and hopefully receive advice on how to be successful in this field. And you'll see that that kind of comes through. People talk about not really being sure about what being a professional biostatistician is, what they're going to do next in their career as a biostatistician. So career was really the thing that was coming through. So again, not technical skills, it was what do I do next? I've maybe finished my studies, maybe a year or two into postdoc, what do I do now? So from these expressions of interest, we then went to pair our 10 mentors with mentees. So what we did, sorry, I apologize for the typo here. This was members within the first 10 years of their career. So we looked at eligible mentees and we tried to pair them with mentors based on the interests and what people reported they could offer. So one example, one of the mentors said that they would be willing to support someone that's looking for work-life balance and managing family expectations with the career. And actually one of my mentees asked for exactly that and what they were looking for. So that was perfect. That made it very, very easy for me to go, they're a really nice fit together because they've actually are looking for exactly the same kind of things in their discussions. Now, because the mentees were the more vulnerable out of the mentee-mentor pairs, they're the ones that are trying to embark in their careers. They're early career statisticians, some from overseas, some without very many connections at all. So it was important to us that we actually contacted the mentee in the first instance to see that they were comfortable with the pairing. Now that can be really hard because sometimes, you don't know if you're going to get on with someone until you meet them. That's just the nature of things. Sometimes mentoring programs don't work because pairs just don't connect. So we did the best that we could, but at least we wanted to contact the mentee in case there was any prior reason that they didn't feel that they might be able to work with one another, so that we could then have a chance to try and rematch without having to engage the mentor at the same time. So once the mentees all agreed that they were comfortable with the pair that the mentor that they were assigned to, we contacted the mentors to see if they were also comfortable. And as I say, that's the approach we're going to take going into the program for this next round, because we still feel that the mentees, we want to protect both mentees and mentors, but we're particularly aware of the vulnerability of being a mentee in this kind of relationship. So another thing that I was very mindful of, given particularly the mentors' concerns about embarking on the program and their kind of lack of confidence about where to go with this, was that it was really important for us to create a guidance document to really help the mentors and mentees know what they should expect out of the program. So we created this brief 4-page document to really highlight that we want this mentoring program to be mentee driven. It's up to the mentees to identify the needs that they have and bring those needs to the mentors so the mentors can best support them. So it was definitely going to be a mentee driven program. Then the mentees, it was important that they had an idea of what kind of goals they wanted to achieve and that they can get assistance developing and progressing these goals with the mentor. We also highlighted that it's really important initially to establish what was an acceptable time commitment for both parties. So in the very initial meeting, we advised that they would negotiate and agree what suits them in terms of frequency of meetings and what they wanted to work on together. But really with a mentoring program, the first meeting should be very much about getting to know one another. So sometimes the goals don't happen in the initial meeting. Sometimes it takes till the second meeting for those to begin. So really the first meeting is about meet and greet and sharing your experiences, particularly from the mentor's perspective, talking about what they've done in their career so that the mentee can think about what particular questions and things they can get help from their mentor. And then the idea was from that and successive meetings, they could develop a more detailed plan together with achievable goals. So another thing that I was really aware of was that people that hadn't been involved in a mentoring program, both mentees and mentors, may not be really aware of what that kind of relationship involves. And as I say, there was some preconception that it might have been about technical skills sharing. So we were trying to highlight that, you know, the mentor is not a replacement for a supervisor or a manager. So for a student, it's not a new PhD supervisor that you can chat technical skills with. Although saying that, of course, it's great if with your mentor you can talk about your mutual interests in statistics. Of course, that's something you might not be getting in your workplace, but certainly we didn't want the mentors to feel the pressure that they were to answer all these complex technical questions. It's more about general skills sharing and career progression. It's important that both mentees and mentors could establish relationships of trust. So all of the communication had to be treated in the strictest of confidence. And I was very mindful as well in surveying the mentors and mentees that everything that I got was anonymized, and I'm desperately trying not to identify anyone in my presentation. One thing I also did when I was connecting mentors and mentees, and in retrospect, I think this may not have been the best plan, was that I would send an email to mentees separately and blind carbon copy them all. So the mentees didn't know the other mentees that were in the program, and I did the same thing with the mentors. And I think in retrospect, it probably would have been good for the mentors to be able to communicate with one another, and same with the mentees. So I've adapted the program to take that into account, as I'll talk about in a bit. So the other thing I wanted to stress is that for all we wanted to encourage people to participate in the full 12 months of the programme, it is completely voluntary. Sometimes after the initial meeting or two, we do know that people don't necessarily connect, or perhaps in the second meeting, you know, everything that they wanted is kind of resolved and they've got what they needed out of the relationship. So for all we were encouraging the programme to continue, it was voluntary and we weren't obliging anyone to remain within the programme for the full period. So one of the other things I found quite challenging when we were embarking on this, so of course, as a statistician, I really wanted some data and I wanted to be able to assess the success of a pilot program. Now, that's really tricky. When we look to the literature on mentoring programs, success is typically measured according to the amount of peers that remain within a program. Now, you know, that is one metric, but of course, being a statistician, I was like, is that good enough? And other things, they often don't do surveys continuously throughout a program. So they'll do the initial expression of interest like we did, where you get some idea of what the needs are that the mentee has. And then they'll only do a follow-up program right at the end that just says things like, did you enjoy the program? Did you like your mentor? That kind of thing. And while again, they were valuable questions, what we wanted during the course of the program was to monitor a few different aspects that we thought mentorship could help support. So these are some of the key things. Now, again, looking at the surveys, and apologies to my mentors and mentees that may be here, I think the surveys are probably longer than actually they needed to be, and I'll bear that in mind for future programs. But we did try and have multiple choice questions to limit the burden for mentors and mentees. But we conducted surveys baseline, mid-program and post-program, looking at some key themes for the mentees. So general work satisfaction, work-life balance, communication skills, confidence, their confidence in knowing what they want to do in their career was one thing, and also their feelings of connection to other biostatisticians and bioinformaticians. So the survey was very driven by what we thought it would achieve for the mentees, but we tried to partner these kind of questions that we're asking the mentees with similar questions for the mentors. Okay, so I talked about the first challenge, getting mentors. Now, the second challenge, of course, is COVID-19. So basically, their program launched in January. We'd encouraged our mentors and mentees to meet during February, but a lot of them only were initiating their connections just as COVID hit. People started to work from home, people's job situations were changing. And we suddenly thought, well, all of these plans people may have had when they created the baseline survey and talked about what they wanted to achieve might have completely changed. That being said, as I say, I was quite happy that we had decided to encourage people to engage using phone calls or video conferencing. And I was very appreciative of some of my mentees and mentors that reached out at the start of the program that were able to meet in person, saying, Karen, can you please tell us to stop meeting in person now? Just say, we want the program to still go, but we're a bit worried about COVID. So as I say, I felt, although COVID was a challenge and trying to interpret what people's needs were and how much they would change because of COVID was going to be tricky, I actually felt that it was more important than ever to have a mentoring program connecting statisticians, because people were suddenly even more isolated than usual, working from home, sometimes having barely any contact with their teams and colleagues. So for all it was a challenge, it was something we decided to work through, and we still encourage the mentors and mentees to reach out to us if they wanted further support. Okay, so before I hand over to Raj and Chris to talk about their experiences in the program, I thought I'd give you some data since I collected so much of it. So I thought I'd start off with the usual metric that people use, which is how many people completed the program. So 3 of our pairs dropped out. And again, I'm obviously not doing any formal statistics on any of this with my sample size of 10 mentees, 10 mentors. But, you know, it seemed pretty good that given a year where we had COVID and everything was upside down, we did manage to retain quite a lot of our pairs into the program. But look, importantly, it wasn't only who completed the program. We had encouraged our peers to meet a minimum of 3 times during the program. So you'll see here that actually, according to, you know, per protocol, I guess, one of our peers only met the 1 time, whereas the other 6 were meeting a bit more regularly. Now, just to give a little bit of context, as I did get some feedback as to why some of the peers didn't work out. Sometimes the matching just wasn't right, and I'm going to bear that in mind for future programs. Another thing was time differences. So again, we had some people participating from Western Australia, and they were paired with people in a different state. And I think that particular time difference was quite problematic. So they didn't continue. One pair I just didn't hear from at all. So I just assume that just never really got off the ground. And just to make you aware, if you're thinking about participating as a mentee, this is the time people reportedly spent on the program. Now, this includes the meetings. So, you know, some of them may have only been attending the meetings and that's it, and just having the meet and greet, and all they really wanted was that connection. But others may have spent time between times, you know, maybe improving their CV or working on some goals and some planning to discuss with their mentors. So that's why some of the mentees may have spent a little bit longer in the program. So some great news for our mentors. Thank you to the mentors. All of the mentees, so we were asking people in 5-point Likert scales to rate quality and various aspects of the mentoring program. So all of the mentees of the 7, of course, that completed the program rated the quality of the mentoring as good or very good. So well done, mentors. And 6 of the 7 mentees stated they'd recommend the program to others. One of them didn't say they wouldn't, they just said that they weren't so sure. And I think that also reflects, you know, perhaps changing circumstances last year and not really being sure where things were heading in the world. And the mentees said they really enjoyed participating in the program. And the one that was a bit more variable was achieving what they wanted in the program. You'll see that 3 of our 7 participants were kind of uncertain. So I think that highlights that we might need to give mentees a little bit more guidance as to what they could be hoping to achieve and support in terms of what they can get out of a mentoring program. Okay, so now I've got some of my longitudinal graphs. Again, no formal statistics, just some pictures. It's all very inconclusive, but I thought I would show you all because I collected the data. As I say, there were these key themes that I was looking to see how they would change over the program. But as I say, I'm conscious that last year was a big mess. So who knows what was helpful and what was not, and what people ended up chatting about. But we looked at things like general work satisfaction, again, on a 5-point Likert scale. Now, only 2 of the 7 participants that completed the program ended with a higher job satisfaction than they began. So that was 6 and 7. No participants ended the program with a lower satisfaction level. So I guess that's good. But again, I wouldn't necessarily say that this was down to the mentoring program. I'm just putting these statistics out there for you. Work-life balance was a bit more variable. So 3 ended with higher, but 1 ended up with a lower balance. And again, whether they weren't getting support to manage work-life balance or suddenly COVID hit and biostatisticians became incredibly sought after might have been one of the reasons for that. Communication with managers and other statisticians, we really thought that communicating with a mentor might really help improve communication more broadly. But again, as with the prior measure we were looking at, some ended with a higher score, some ended with a lower score. And again, it's hard to know whether mentors were sort of supporting with that, or if COVID meant people were so isolated that of course they had even less communication than normal because of COVID times. But it's interesting, like this one that kind of jumped wave 2, went up to, you know, feeling that they were having good communication, and then it completely fell away again. Confidence, as I say, was another thing we were looking to help support. But actually what was interesting with our mentees is that a lot of them reported having quite high confidence. So the ones that didn't change were all sitting at 4 on a 5-point scale. So they didn't really have much room for moving. And we did have a couple that improved. Career plans. So this is something you really would think that a mentoring program would help support. You know, really having a clear idea of where you want to head with your career. Now, 3 of the 7 participants increased during the course of the program, 1 decreased, and 2 remain unchanged. So one of those, though, of course, scored 5. They were very, very clear on what they wanted to do right from the offset, but they wanted to be involved in the mentoring program. So whilst the other one was just kind of unsure and remained unsure. And again, the connection to other statisticians is a really tricky one, because while we feel that we're connecting people by helping give them a mentor, they may have suddenly become more isolated because of COVID. So 3 of our 7 participants increased feelings of connection during the programme, but 3 didn't change. But again, what was quite good is that none ended the programme with lower support scores. And that, I guess, was a concern given COVID, and a lot of people, you know, particularly in Victoria, we've been working from home for a very, very long time. So you might have felt less connection because of that. So I'm only going to touch on some of the mentor data, but I just wanted to highlight for those of you that are thinking of mentors what the mentor's perspective was. So mentors, some more missing data. So actually only 6 of the 7 mentors responded to the survey, but saying that the mentor, it looks like that only had the 1 meeting with the mentee didn't respond when you look at the time spent on the programme. So because they would have only had very limited meetings contact. But what was great was that the mentors responded that they very much enjoyed participating in the programme. So again, like the mentees, there was general satisfaction in being part of this. Other great things that the mentors said was that they all recommended participating in the programme to other members. And again, of course, this is among those that completed the programme, and all responded that they'd be willing to participate in future mentoring programmes, which is great, and I really appreciate that. But again, one thing I wanted to highlight, reflecting in the mentees being unsure of getting quite what they wanted out of the programme, that's also reflected a little in what the mentors reported and knowing what their mentee wanted to achieve. So there's a bit of variability there. One disagreed, they just weren't very sure of what their mentee was wanting to get out of the programme. But you know, there were 4 of the 6 that responded that said they agreed or strongly agreed. But we are mindful that this is something we can maybe improve in supporting for the remainder of the programme. And just some more, as I say, I'm not a qualitative expert, so I'm just giving you some anecdotes from the statisticians responded, but just some of the things they said that they really benefited from the programme. One of the mentees that was transitioning from study to work found that quite difficult, but their mentor was there when they needed them, which was always helpful. And that they now, having worked for a bit longer, feel that they have more of an insight as to how a mentor could help them. So I guess we have to bear that in mind when we're peering as well about students that are transitioning may have different needs to early career statisticians that may be clearer on where they want to go and have different support requirements. Another mentee just said the programme being really valuable. Having someone very senior to me career-wise to bounce ideas and concerns about my own future off has helped me greatly. And mentors generally gave me some favourable comments. But as I say, it wasn't all shiny, happy. I'm obviously giving you some of the good news here. As I say, there were some concerns about perhaps not matching people as well as I could have, which, as I say, I'll take on board. As well as I say, this main message with some of the mentors feeling like they still, at the end, weren't quite comfortable that they knew exactly what they were offering or how to support directing the mentee, particularly when they weren't quite so confident in knowing what they wanted out of the relationship. So as well as general comments, we got some feedback about things that the mentors and mentees would like to see in future programs, which we're taking on board. So one of the mentees did talk about the fact that they weren't connected to other mentees, and that it might be good having more peer support, and that's something we're taking on board for the full program. And also, as I say, the key thing with mentors is this idea of guidance, and so we're also thinking about having formal training for mentors and mentees. Nothing too time intensive, but certainly a kind of induction program for those that are selected to help them know what to expect. And from someone that has certainly more mentoring expertise than I do, can come in and chat about what mentoring can do for you as both a mentee and a mentor. Okay, so at this point, I'd like to hand you over to Raj, who was one of the mentees that participated in our program, and he's going to just tell you a little bit about his experience for any of you that are thinking of perhaps becoming a mentee yourself.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, everyone. So my experience is really good, and when I was looking into the graph, I can confidently say I'm the person who had the highest number of meetings. So I was fortunate enough to be paired with Chris at University of Sydney. So my initial interest into the mentoring program was to understand the career prospects as a statistician, because there are so many options, so many fields that you can go into after you graduate. So I just wanted to understand what my mentor's experience was and how do you decide on this point. So it was my first meeting was at Sydney University, and it was a face-to-face meeting, and I was looking forward to more face-to-face meetings, but unfortunately, as Karen said, COVID hit and we transitioned to online meetings. Well, it did not hamper much, except that I owe Chris a coffee. But what was good from me is that Chris shared his overseas experiences and how that helped into deciding a bit of his career where he is now at. So having diverse experience, which I was at that point thinking might be not beneficial for the career, it actually ended up for him as a beneficiary. So these were some insights that I got from him, and most of our discussions, we didn't set any agendas for the meetings. It was very casual, and he used to discuss about the online profiles I should have before getting a job and what that career prospect is. And perhaps this was one of those incidents where I could actually talk with my potential interviewers and their perspective as well. So I could ask Chris, when you're hiring a postdoc, what you are looking into him. So this is a question perhaps I couldn't have asked my supervisor in an academic setting. So this is one of those informal questions that I could ask him. So this definitely helped. And about online presence, as I was talking about, so Chris was very clear about what I could do to help prospect with my career. So all our discussions were in the career aspects. And regarding academia, there were times when Chris and I would be talking about some R packages that came out and R Markdown as well. And one of my personal confusion is that when I am mingling with non-statisticians, how do I express the views? I mean, how much do I tell them? And how much technical aspect should I limit to, right? So these were, because in last 5 years or so in my training, I've always worked with statisticians. So what would happen if I talk with the non-statisticians? Because Chris is part of a group where there are a lot of non-statisticians and the other experts don't need to know all the technical details. So he could tell me that how to understand the room and how to express the sort of advice that I can pass on. So these were like really beneficial for me. And one of the shocking points from my end was that in interviews, there would be time where non-statisticians will be interviewing me. And at that time, I have to be technical enough not to be too technical. So this is something that I think I will keep chatting with Chris. And one of the good things about this mentoring program, I'm still in contact with Chris, not for academia, but for other career and bits. And one of the good things about this is that the work and life balances, something I wasn't actually thinking about when I was meeting Chris, but he was very clear that I need to think about it as I'm entering my career as well. So this is one of my takeaways from the mentoring program as well. So yeah, and thanks to Karen, this was an amazing experience for me. Yep. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Raj. Really appreciate that. Chris, can I hand over to you now to let us know how you found things from the mentoring perspective?
Yep, no problems, Karen. So I was one of those recalcitrant mentors who answered the second round of Karen's email because I felt quite bad that no one else had volunteered. And it turned out to be quite good overall, I'll say. So by background, I've worked in a lot of different places in NGOs, government, currently academia, academic sort of organizations. And a lot of that time I was the only biostatistician in the village, so to speak. And that was something I thought might be a perspective that I've sort of been through, that I might be able to help someone talk through who's currently in that, because it is pretty difficult to sort of jump in a career with this training and you're sort of the only one there doing it. And it's a common experience, I think, for statisticians in general. And so I was paired with someone who's really just finished their studying in another city. So we were doing this sort of via Zoom and phone, which worked out very nicely given what happened during the rest of the year. I think probably the sort of the main sort of things we covered was, having that sort of being that situation of sort of being that sole statistician, and how you navigate and talk to people and work with people, and in a sense, how you manage, if you're a statistician, how you manage your manager who isn't a statistician, I think it can sometimes be a little bit of a tricky thing. So other thing was sort of around finding in local networks that that he could potentially be involved with as well, with other statisticians and biostatisticians. And by and large, it was quite informal. So we sort of talked to start with just to see how he wanted it to run. Did we want to set goals? Did we want to have, monthly meetings? And what we seemed to work for him and was fine for me was really just to have a chat every couple of months about what had been going on with work, and so that I could pass on to him some perspectives and some resources potentially. So in terms of commitment, it was very, very small for me, to be honest. So it's really just in the total duration of the program, it was probably, maximum 5 hours of my time. And the mentee was very flexible as well. So that obviously helps when you've got a lot going on. And I think the thing I will be quite clear with, because I think there could be some anxiety about this, is there was no real sort of specific technical questions. So there was no asking me to check his R code or ask how to do a sample size calculation for him, nothing like that. So what we did do was mostly around career and how to navigate the workplace, which is something they don't teach in your master's degree, which would be very hard to teach, I think. We did have some discussion around statistical concepts. So like when he was faced with doing some work involving propensity scores, we sort of had some sort of conceptual discussion around that, which to be honest was quite enjoyable. It's I quite like talking about that. So it's more on the sort of conceptual and interesting side. So I think for me, it was surprising. Like I kind of felt I was going in with something to offer, and I was quite happy with that. But I did find the process encouraging, particularly if you can find someone and pair with someone who has been in similar situations than you, and then you're able to maybe give them some things to think about, and they sort of come back being able to navigate things better or have a better perspective on things. That's quite encouraging for you. They also were working in sort of an area of health I'd never really had much experience in. So that was actually quite interesting to see and hear about the sorts of data, the sort of research questions and the approaches they were taking there, because it was a little bit different from what I was used to. And I guess this certainly wasn't my main reason for doing this, but it's always nice to add to your CV when you're applying to grants that you can demonstrate leadership by participating in a mentoring program as well. So it's a nice one little sentence there you can add, which to my mind is probably the least important thing of probably what I got out of it. So yeah, I'd definitely encourage it. Like given the sort of what I got out of it versus the time commitment, I think it's a pretty clear yes for me for the program. And I think that's all. Thanks, Karen.
Thanks, Chris. So I've got a couple more slides to talk about the new program that we're introducing. But I thought at this point, has anyone got any questions that they want to ask about the pilot or ask Raj or Chris about their experiences that would be useful to them? It might be a good point to take a pause and ask now.
Just jump in. people want, they can just type their questions down in chat, or because we've got a bit of a gap in things. If someone wants to unmute and ask a question direct, they can go for it.
All right, well, maybe I'll continue and tell you about what's happening next. And if anyone's got any questions about what we're doing more broadly, then you can ask about that. Okay, so the next thing we're doing is expanding the pilot program. And as I say, it started with biostatisticians, but now we want to reach out to statisticians across all of the society, and we want greater reach outside of academia where possible if we can. The other thing that we've changed, as I mentioned, we were having a bit of a debate about who should be eligible to be a mentor. And I think there's a lot that can be offered by the earlier mid-career statisticians, particularly to the students that are transitioning because they're a sort of similar stage of their career. So we've actually now got a two-tier mentoring program in the full this full launch, because I guess we felt that would also maybe attract more mentors, because often the earlier career are more keen to develop these leadership skills and really want to give back. So we've now opened it up to ensuring that we've got sort of earlier career statisticians that can support students, and then we've got the more experienced that can support the earlier career statisticians. So of course, what we're going to do is ensure that whoever you're paired with does have more experience than you, but we are willing and keen to hear from people that are earlier career if they're interested in getting some mentoring experience and some support from the society to get that kind of experience. Another thing, as I mentioned, that we're introducing is some training for the mentors and mentees. Now, at this point, we think it's likely to be just like a half-day session. Of course, it will be conducted likely via Zoom, but we're currently scoping different mentoring organisations to see who can give us the best kind of thing that fits our needs, recognising that statisticians are a little bit different at times to other employees, and that we've got needs that others may not have. And as I mentioned, the other thing that we're introducing is this peer mentoring for both mentors and mentees. So in expanding the pilot, we're now recruiting up to 20 mentor-mentee pairs across all sectors. And as I say, hoping, fingers crossed, that we're going to get enough mentors applying this time. But if any of you know of people that haven't put in an expression of interest but you think might be interested, then please send them our way. We've also established a committee. So I left the Biostatistics and Bioinformatics section and actually became part of the Continuous Professional Development Committee. And as an offshoot of that committee, we've created our own mentoring subcommittee. And what we wanted to have was some reach across Australia as well, where possible. So sadly, I'm still missing out on Northern Territory, WA, and Tassie, but I do have committee members from Brisbane, Auckland, Adelaide, Melbourne, and Sydney. So we're trying our best to reach out to local branches and the different sections to try and encourage them to advertise our programme more broadly. So hopefully you'll see more of their names as the year continues. But what we also want to say is that I know that there's very many local branches and perhaps sections that are considering their own mentoring programmes. We are not introducing this as a replacement to anything that local branches want to do. I know the Victorian branch is still likely to want to do their networking speeds mentoring, and that's absolutely fine. We want to be here to support any other mentoring initiatives and give information back on what we've learned through the process if anyone wants that. So the new details for the full programme. So the mentees, again, could be a student or within the first 10 years of a career in statistics. Again, it's for members of the SSA, and they have to be willing to commit to participating in the programme over a 6-month period. So we've now decided to make it a shorter, sharp programme, because what we did find was looking at the trajectories of meetings over the year, it did kind of tail off in the mid-year programme. And I think that actually people often can get what they need from a shorter relationship, and if they want to prolong it, then they can do that themselves. But what we want to support really is the initiation of the contact and helping with these needs to begin with. As I say, mentors should have at least 5 years experience working as a statistician. And as I say, those that are more early career, we're going to make sure are not going to be paired with someone that is more experienced. And again, as before, mentors must be a member of the SSA. We're still not putting accreditation as a requirement. And again, it's just, you've got to be willing to participate over the 6-month period. Of course, as I said before, while we encourage people to participate for the full 6 months, there's no obligation. If things don't work, we totally understand. But what we really like is getting the feedback from the pair to see what went wrong so we can learn about that for future. So as we did before, our committee, which is great now, we've got a committee to help with the pairing, which is wonderful. So we're going to match mentors to mentees based on your sector. Also, we will look at location again, bearing in mind that the problems with the time difference with Western Australia. So we will look at those factors too, and also the needs that people have, and try as much as we can from the qualitative information we get to make sure that we're pairing appropriately. Now, again, each mentor will only be assigned one mentee. We're kicking off the programme in April, but we're hoping to have the pairs all sorted by March so that training can commence end of March, beginning of April, and it will run till September with just the follow-up survey right at the end. And again, we're trying to encourage a minimum of meetings. We're hoping that people will try and meet at least monthly during the sort of the four months between the kickoff and the final survey. So at least 4 meetings over 6 months, if possible. And as I say, the new addition that we have is this opportunity to participate in peer mentoring groups. So we're going to try and group people into 5s, because we think if people are meeting online, any more than 4 or 5 in Zoom, I don't know if you probably all are familiar with problems with Zoom, but I find if there's more than 4 or 5 people, then often it's difficult to have constructive conversations. So we thought we'd limit the peer mentoring to that number and see how that goes. So again, we'll have to think about how best to obtain feedback from the mentees and mentors about that process. So before I finish by giving you the details of the programme, I just wanted to acknowledge everyone's support in this programme, particularly the executive. Adrian and Jess have been amazingly helpful and supportive of what we've been trying to do here. And Marie-Louise couldn't have done this without her. She has been phenomenally supportive and has very much directed me to any mentoring things that she could find online. Also, thank you to the chairs of the Biostat section, and also especially big thank you to the mentors and mentees who participated in the pilot and gave me such useful data to help adapt the programme for the full initiative. So if after all this you are interested in taking part, we are taking applications for the programme until the 22nd of February, so you've still got some time to get your expression of interest in. Further details can be found on the Stats Society website, and it will be circulated again in the newsletter tomorrow, and that provides a link to the Google application form. And if I could encourage you as much as possible to give me the clear details about what you can offer as a mentor or what you want out of the programme, that's really, really helpful for us in terms of our pairing. And that's one of the questions that's on the expression of interest form. So I'm pretty much almost at time, but I'll wrap up here. And if anyone's got any questions for Raj, Chris, or I, we'd be very happy to answer them.